It starts with a laugh. That is always how it begins, with something so light, so effortless, that you almost feel guilty for questioning it. A laugh between friends. A dare that nobody takes seriously. A door left slightly open at the end of a hallway that you were never supposed to walk down in the first place. But there it is. And there you are. And the distance between curiosity and consequence has never looked so short. We are creatures built for pleasure. That is not a flaw. That is architecture. Evolution carved into our nervous systems a reward system so elegant, so precise, that the mere anticipation of something good releases the same chemicals as the good thing itself. We are wired to chase. We are designed to lean forward, to reach, to want whatever is glowing just beyond our fingertips. And for most of human history, that instinct kept us alive. It pushed us toward food, toward warmth, toward each other. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. The things that glow are not always the things that nourish us. And the feeling that something is going to be wonderful, that electric, almost childlike certainty that this right here is going to be the best thing. Sometimes that feeling is the most dangerous thing inside us, because feelings do not lie. Not exactly. They just do not tell the whole truth. There is a game that children play in schoolyards, in backyards, in those long golden afternoons when the world feels infinite and consequence feels like a word that belongs to adults. The game does not have a fixed name, because every group invents their own version of it. But the structure is always the same. Someone proposes something. Everyone agrees it sounds thrilling. And then, one by one, each player steps closer to the edge of whatever they have collectively decided is the edge. The last one to step back loses, or wins, depending on who you ask. What is fascinating is not the game itself. What is fascinating is the moment before the game starts, when everyone is still laughing, still loose-shouldered, still certain that this is just entertainment. That is the moment I want to stay inside for a while. That is the moment where everything that comes after is already quietly decided. Because in that moment, something beautiful and something terrible are wearing the exact same face. Think about the first time you stayed up until 3 in the morning reading something, a book, an article, a thread online that started innocuously enough, and then suddenly you were 3 hours deep and your eyes were burning and you could not stop. There was a pleasure in it. A real, genuine pleasure. The kind that feels almost transgressive, like you are stealing time from sleep and responsibility and getting away with it. And then the alarm sounds at 6. And the pleasure, that specific pleasure, does not translate. It does not cross the border between the night it lived in and the morning that follows. It evaporates somewhere in the 2 hours of broken sleep. And what remains is not the joy of discovery, but the gritty, hollow weight of someone who burned themselves for something that already feels distant. We have all been that person. Most of us will be that person again. Not because we are foolish, but because the architecture of anticipation does not include a warning system. There is no internal alarm that sounds at the threshold between fun and damage. The transition is seamless. It is one continuous experience of pleasure, right up until the moment it becomes something else. And by then, you're already past the point where turning back changes anything. Now I want to talk about something more interior. Something that does not happen in the world outside you, but deep inside the machinery of how your mind constructs reality, and then sells it back to you as entertainment. The first trap is one of the most seductive, because it wears the costume of tenderness. It is called nostalgia. Not the passing, gentle kind. The kind that visits you briefly, while an old song plays, and then releases you back into the present. I am talking about the deliberate kind. The kind you choose. The kind where you sit down with intention and begin to excavate the past. Old photographs, old messages, old letters, old playlists, old names that you search in the small hours of the night, because something vague and unresolved is pulling you backward, and you tell yourself it is just curiosity, just a little harmless remembering. It starts as comfort. It genuinely does. There is real warmth in those images, in those voices, in the version of yourself that existed inside those moments. And for a while, the excavation feels like restoration, like you are recovering something that was lost, polishing it back to brightness, returning to yourself a piece of your own history. But here is what nostalgia does not tell you while it has your attention. It edits. The mind, in its extraordinary and sometimes treacherous mercy, does not store the past the way a camera stores an image. It stores it the way a painter retouches a portrait, softening the unflattering angles, brightening the color, removing the weather and the exhaustion and the specific texture of difficult, ordinary days. What you are looking at when you look at the past is not the past. It is the past filtered through every year of longing that has accumulated since. So when you reach back, when you send that message, when you drive past that neighborhood, when you call that person whose voice you remember as belonging to a golden era of your life, you are not making contact with the real thing. You are colliding with the gap between what you remember and what actually is.
Welcome.
And that
Today,
gap,
we're diving into the
that specific
world
gap,
of our feline friends.
is where a
Meet my
particular
furry
and quiet
companion
kind of
here,
heartbreak
a perfect
lives.
example of the grace
The
and
people
intelligence
changed.
we'll be discussing.
Of course they changed. You changed too, though it is always easier to notice it in others. The place you drove past is just a place. The version of yourself that was so alive inside those years exists only in memory now, and memory,
context,
for all its
as you
warmth,
can see here.
cannot be inhabited. You can visit it. You cannot live there. And yet we keep trying to move back in. The second psychological trap is louder, more obvious from the outside, and somehow more invisible from within. It is the romance of danger. There is a kind of person, or rather, there is a kind of energy, because most of us have encountered it at some point, that operates like a weather system. Unpredictable, intense, capable of extraordinary stillness, and then sudden violence. Not necessarily physical violence, the kind of violence that exists in words that land wrong, in silences that last too long, in the way certain people can fill a room with electricity and then disappear, leaving everyone around them slightly disoriented, recalibrating, reaching for them again. Being near that kind of person feels like being alive in a way that ordinary life does not always manage to produce. And that feeling is real. I want to be clear about that because it is easy to dismiss it as immaturity or poor judgment. And sometimes it is those things, but it is also something more honest than that. The heightened state that instability produces in the people around it. The hypervigilance, the constant reading of signals, the roller coaster of closeness and distance. It mimics, neurologically, the state of falling in love. The brain in proximity to chaos produces the same cocktail of chemicals as the brain in proximity to passion. So you are not confused. You are not broken for having mistaken one for the other. You are just running on very persuasive data.
Today, we'll
the problem is that the body
fascinating
cannot
world of
sustain
human
that state
thought.
indefinitely.
Join me.
It was designed for short emergencies, not long-term residence in someone else's instability. What begins as magnetism, as freedom, as the exhilarating sensation that you have finally found something real and unfiltered and alive, begins slowly to hollow you out. The peace you used to take for granted starts to feel like absence. The quiet moments that come when the storm briefly settles begin to feel like the calm before something, rather than just calm. And by the time you recognize what has happened, you have organized your entire nervous system around someone else's chaos. The danger was never outside you. It moved in. It rearranged the furniture. And now the thing that is hurting you feels, in a terrible and precise way, like home. The third trap is perhaps the most modern of the three. It belongs to this specific era in a way the others do not, though the impulse behind it is ancient. I call it emotional tourism. You have seen it. You may have done it. I have done it, in one form or another. And I suspect most people would recognize themselves in some version of this if they were honest. It is the act of entering someone else's world, or a community, or a project, or a relationship, or an artistic movement, or a cause, not because you intend to stay, but because it is interesting. Because the novelty of it is genuinely compelling. Because from the outside, looking in, it has a texture and a warmth and a specificity that your own life seems, in that particular moment, to lack. And for a while, you are genuinely there. You are present, enthusiastic, asking questions, learning the language of that world, feeling the particular pleasure of being a newcomer who is welcomed. Because newcomers bring energy and attention, and people are almost always initially generous with that. But you are always going to leave, not because you are cruel. Emotional tourists are rarely cruel in any deliberate sense. They are, more often, people who are drawn toward experience but afraid of depth, people who have learned, somewhere along the way, that the safest place to be in any situation is the beginning of it, where everything is still potential and nothing has yet been asked of you. The middle of things is where the real cost appears, where the project hits its difficult phase, where the community has its conflicts and its grievances and its long institutional memory of old wounds, where the relationship asks you to witness something uncomfortable and stay anyway, where the cause requires not just enthusiasm but endurance. That is when the tourist moves on, and they leave behind them. This is the part that the tourist often does not stay long enough to see. They leave behind a specific kind of damage. Not the dramatic, obvious kind. The quiet kind. The kind that lives in the person who opened a door and showed their real interior, and then watched someone lose interest in it. The kind that teaches people, gradually, that being known leads to being left. That the safest strategy is to keep the interesting surface available and the real depth hidden. And the tourist, carrying their collection of beginnings, their catalogue of fascinating worlds briefly visited, carries their own damage too. The increasing inability to feel at home anywhere. The faint but persistent sense of being outside every room, even the ones they chose to enter. The loneliness of someone who has been everywhere and belongs nowhere. Now I want to give you a structure. Not because structure is a cage, but because it is a map. And these particular experiences, the nostalgia trap, the romance of danger, the emotional tourism, all follow the same map, even when their surface looks entirely different. 3 acts. Every time. The first act is the dazzle. This is the phase of total, uncritical immersion in the pleasure of the thing. Everything is bright. Everything confirms the decision to be here. The old photographs are beautiful, and the memories they carry are warm, and the distance of time has filed down every rough edge until what remains is something close to perfect. The chaotic person is electrifying and original, and you have never felt so awake. The new world you entered is rich and complex, and the people in it are unlike anyone you have known. In this phase, there are no counterarguments. There are no warning signs, or rather, and this is important, there are warning signs, but they are invisible because you are not looking for them. You are not looking for them because the brain, flooded with the chemicals of novelty and anticipation, has temporarily reclassified caution as pessimism. To notice a red flag in this phase is to ruin the experience, and the experience is too good to ruin. So the signs are there, and they are not seen. The second act is the crack. Something small happens, a moment of dissonance, a detail that does not fit the story you are inside. The old friend you reconnected with says something that reveals, briefly and uncomfortably, how much they changed or how much you did, and you feel, for a second, the vertigo of realizing that the person in front of you is not the person in the photograph. The chaotic person disappears for 3 days without explanation, and when they return acts as though nothing happened, and you feel the particular exhaustion of someone who has been anxious for 72 hours being asked to perform normalcy. The community you joined has an argument online, and for the first time you see its ugliness, its factions, its old grievances, and the warmth you felt when you first arrived seems like it belonged to a different place. These moments are the crack, and they are not, in themselves, the end of anything. Cracks are not collapses. Cracks are information. But here is what almost always happens in the second act. The crack is spackled over, quickly, efficiently, with whatever material is available. The dissonance is explained away. You tell yourself that the friend was just having a bad day, that the chaotic person is going through something, that every community has conflict, and this one is still special, that the photograph is still accurate, even if the person has shifted slightly. And you keep going, because stopping would mean acknowledging the crack. And acknowledging the crack would mean questioning the first act. And questioning the first act would mean sitting with the possibility that the dazzle was, at least partially, a construction. And we are not ready for that yet. The third act is the collapse. It does not announce itself. That is what makes it so disorienting. One moment you are still in motion, still inside the story, still telling yourself the version that makes sense. And then something happens, one final thing, and suddenly the weight of everything you did not let yourself see comes down all at once. The old friend does not respond to your last message, and you sit with the phone in your hand and realize that the reconnection was never going to be what you needed it to be. That you were not trying to find that person. You were trying to find the past. And the past is not findable. It is not hiding somewhere, waiting to be retrieved. It is finished. And the grief of that, the specific grief of something that ended before you were ready, and that you spent years pretending had just paused, arrives now, fully formed, in the silence where a reply should be. The chaotic person says something that finally, irrevocably, crosses a line. And in the hours afterward, alone with it, you feel not just the hurt of that specific moment, but the accumulated cost of every moment that led there. Every night of anxiety, every walk on eggshells, every conversation you edited in real time to avoid triggering the storm. The total weight of it arrives together, and you realize that you have been managing someone else's volatility as though it were a full-time occupation, and you have not noticed because the electricity kept convincing you that this was what being alive felt like. And the community, the project, the relationship you entered as a tourist, you leave, as you always knew you would, and the lightness you expected to feel does not come. Instead, there is a dull, persistent guilt. The awareness that people
And
opened
that
something real
concludes
for
our
you
session
and you
for
treated
today.
it as scenery.
I hope
That you
found this
consumed the warmth
information
of their
helpful.
belonging without
The
contributing
key
to
is
its
to be
continuation.
gentle.
That
Just press
somewhere,
the paw
someone
pad
is a little
slightly
less
to
willing to
expose
open a
the
door
nail,
because of
and the
how you
cap
used the
slides
last
right
one.
on.
There is a concept in psychology, sometimes called the adaptation treadmill. The idea that we adapt to almost everything. Good things stop feeling as good. Bad things stop feeling as bad. The extraordinary becomes ordinary. The painful becomes familiar. And familiarity. This is the key. Familiarity feels like safety, even when it is not. So we return to the things that hurt us not because we are masochists, but because the familiar has a gravitational pull that reason cannot always overcome. The brain, in its extraordinary efficiency, learns to predict the shape of an experience, and prediction, even of a negative outcome, registers as comfort. It is the comfort of knowing what comes next, of not being surprised. That is why it is so difficult to leave the things that are slowly damaging us. Not because we love the damage, but because we have learned the texture of it. We have memorized its rhythms. And starting over, beginning something new, means re-entering the terrifying openness of not knowing, of being a beginner again in the business of your own life. And that specific terror is what keeps so many of us inside the burning building, standing in the smoke, telling ourselves that we remember when this was warm. The mythology of this is ancient. Icarus did not fly too close to the sun because he was reckless. He flew too close to the sun because the flight was extraordinary, because the altitude felt like freedom, because the world below, the maze his father had built for him, felt like confinement by comparison. And when you are that high, and the wind is that clean, and the whole planet is laid out beneath you like a painting, the wax on your wings is not the thing you are thinking about. The Greeks told that story not to warn us away from ambition, but to give us a framework for understanding what happens when the feeling of flight becomes more important than the physics of it. When the experience of soaring overrides our awareness of its conditions and its limits. We are all Icarus at some point. We are all mid-flight, temperature rising, thinking this is fine, this is wonderful, this is everything I wanted. And yet I do not believe the answer is to stop flying. There is a temptation, when you understand the pattern, to overcorrect. To become so cautious, so measured, so aware of potential damage that you preemptively eliminate risk from your life the way you might childproof a house. But that kind of living has its own damage, quieter, less visible, but just as real. The person who never chases the feeling never experiences what the feeling was protecting in the first place. The joy, the connection, the creative rush, the love that makes your chest ache, the midnight conversations that change how you see the world. These are not separable from the risk of losing them. They are made of the same material. What I am suggesting is not caution. What I am suggesting is something more nuanced and considerably more difficult. Awareness without armoring. The capacity to stay present in the experience of something wonderful, while also maintaining some small, quiet part of yourself that is watching. Not with suspicion, not with the grim readiness of someone waiting to be disappointed, but with the honest acknowledgement that this feeling, like all feelings, is happening inside a specific set of conditions. That the wax has a melting point. That the glow of anticipation is not the same as the glow of arrival. That the thing that feels like a beginning might be, from a different angle, already a kind of ending. The most generous interpretation of human self-destruction is that it is almost always a misdirected form of searching. We are looking for something real, something that anchors us, that makes us feel alive, that connects us to ourselves and to each other in a way that is undeniable. And we reach for the thing that glows brightest in the moment, because the glow resembles what we are actually looking for, even when the substance underneath is hollow. The nostalgia glows like return, but return is not possible. You can visit the coordinates. You cannot re-enter the moment. The chaos glows like vitality, but vitality that depends on instability is just hypervigilance with better lighting. The novelty of someone else's world glows like belonging. But belonging requires staying, and staying requires being willing to be ordinary inside a place, not just fascinating to it. There is a phrase I keep returning to. It does not belong to anyone famous. I heard it from someone who had spent a very long time doing something that looked, from the outside, like it was making them happy. They said it looked exactly like joy. From the inside it felt exactly like joy, but it was eating me. That is the thing, isn't it? That is the whole thing, held in 3 sentences. It looked like joy. It felt like joy. And something essential was being consumed in the process. Not dramatically. Not all at once. The way fire eats through old paper. Slowly at the edges at first. Just a browning, just a curling, and then faster and faster until what was there is not there anymore. So what do we do with this understanding? We do not build walls. We do not stop reaching. We do not delete the old photographs, or avoid interesting people, or refuse to step into worlds that are not our own. We learn, maybe slowly, maybe with many failed attempts, maybe with the specific kind of wisdom that can only be assembled from the wreckage of things we thought would save us. We learn to distinguish between the feeling of joy and the presence of it. Joy, real joy, the kind that does not have a hidden cost waiting at the end of the invoice, is a quiet thing. It does not announce itself. It does not require an audience. It does not escalate. It does not leave you gripping the experience harder as the experience fades, trying to hold on to something that is already becoming memory. Real joy tends to leave you more yourself, not less. It tends to open things rather than close them. It tends to coexist with tiredness and disappointment and ordinary Tuesday afternoons without disappearing. It has weight. It has texture. It stays. The other thing, the glowing thing, the thing that starts with a laugh and ends somewhere you did not intend to go, that thing has speed. It has urgency. It has the particular intensity of something that knows, on some level, that it cannot last. And that intensity is genuinely seductive. There is nothing wrong with you for being drawn to it. But it is worth learning to recognize the speed. Worth learning to feel the difference between being carried forward by something that is building and being pulled forward by something that is burning through itself. And you, on the way to wherever it is going. We are back at the beginning now. Back at the laugh. Back at the door left slightly open. Back at the distance that looks so short between curiosity and consequence. You are standing there still. We all are, always, in one version of this or another. The question is not whether to open the door. The question is whether you are going through it with your eyes open. Whether you are carrying with you, not fear, but the honest and humble awareness that what feels like a beginning might ask more from you than you currently know you have. That you cannot live inside a memory, no matter how beautiful it was. That electricity is not the same as warmth. That entering someone's world carries weight, and weight demands respect. These are not reasons to stay outside. They are just the truth the moment deserves, before the laugh, before the step, before the wax begins to warm. Go. Reach. Chase the glow. But remember that you are in it. That it is happening to you, not just around you. That you are allowed to notice when the brightness starts to cost too much. And that noticing, that small, clear-eyed noticing in the middle of the experience, might be the closest thing we have to grace.